Hello and welcome to this session on location of information. It's a topic that I'm particularly passionate about and I really enjoy teaching when we're in the classroom. Sadly we're not in the classroom, and so hopefully I'm going to be able to invoke some thought and passion through to you now via the means of this video. So what does location matter? That's a big question, isn't it? Why does it matter? And this map, some of you might have seen from GCSE geography, puts a very stark reality on LEDCs and MEDCs in the world, and it would be quite easy to say that all MEDCs have fantastic internet connection. They don't need to worry about the digital divide, whereas all LEDCs do. Except we can look at this map and we can see that that isn't the case. There is the whole of North America, there is the whole of Canada, the whole of Russia, who's part of the MEDC bracket, and then in the LEDCs there are big chunks of the world that actually have some very well connected people in terms of information. And so we can't just simply say that people in MEDCs are well connected and aren't part of the digital divide, and people in LEDCs are. So the digital divide. We live in a ridiculously unequal world when it comes to IT and the access to technology. And I'm going to take these next couple of minutes now to try and explain that to you, because I don't think that we very much appreciate how diverse and how disconnected the world of technology actually is. So take a second to do the following. Think of the digital access that you have in your home right now, and think of the digital access someone you know has who is less fortunate than you. Now when I say less fortunate, it's very easy to start thinking about somebody who you think is poorer than you, or who is not as advantaged as you are. That isn't what I'm saying. I'm talking about somebody who is in a less fortunate position than you are in regards to technology. So that might be that you've got the latest iPhone or the latest Samsung. It might be that you've got the new PS5 and they haven't. It might be that you've got a really good internet connection and they don't. That's what I'm thinking here. So take a second now just to think about what access you have and what access they have. Pause this video to do that, but I'm going to carry on. So you must be thinking now, oh, he's talking about India and Africa, right? Because they're not well connected, and we see very readily that these countries have got poor connection to the world in which we live in terms of technology. But you'd be wrong. I'm talking about here and I'm talking about now. I'm talking about the digital divide, so large that economic factors don't always play a part in them. I'm talking about an unfair, unjust world where those who can access can succeed, and those who can't access simply won't succeed. I'm talking about our lives, and I'm going to use this case study. Okay, on your screen now you'll be able to see two locations. For those of you who live in Crawley and the West Sussex area, you may know these. Otherwise, don't worry, I'm hopefully going to explain them quite well to you. So in the top right hand image you've got a map of Broadfield, a borough, an area of Crawley, well known within the area as being quite disadvantaged, and having a lower house price than other areas, and a higher rate of unemployment and a higher rate of crime. I have to say for a start that I live in Broadfield, and that isn't the case for where I live, but it is known as that across the town and across the neighbouring towns, as being an area that is quite poor and quite disadvantaged. The other area that you can see there is Charwood. Charwood is a beautiful Surrey village that has got a very nice pub, a nice green, cricket green, and some nice houses in it. Higher cost per house than Broadfield and other areas in the local area, and it is also got a very low crime rate and has got a high positive factor when you look on resident views. Now I'm going to talk about digital. Broadfield has got an average internet connection speed of 100 to 200 megabytes per second and is fully fibre connected across the whole of Broadfield. That's 585,000 people that have got access to fibre broadband. We're going to talk about Charwood. Charwood's average download speed is 20 megabytes per second. Do not have full access to fibre, although it is being rolled out. But the average speed, because it isn't fibre to the door, it is fibre to the box, is going to be 25 megabytes per second, so still nowhere near that of Broadfield that we've just discussed. And if we look at that, economically, the two areas are uncomparable. And the digital access of the two areas is equally uncomparable, but it switches. Somebody in Broadfield who has got a low economic footprint or a low economic income, it might not be able to afford the broadband connection that they have got readily available to them. They might not be able to access the internet or these factors easily because they can't afford a computer. The people in Charwood may be able to afford a computer, may be able to afford the best technology, but they can't access it because they don't have the internet connection. It's an interesting one, isn't it? And those are two areas that we know in this area where we live, where we go to school, that those two areas are uncomparable in demographic, in size, in population, and equally they're completely uncomparable in terms of internet connection. It's also worth pointing out that Broadfield has got 5G antennas and Charwood doesn't have a single 5G antenna. That's interesting in itself because I don't know, but it would be interesting to know what percentage of the population of Broadfield have a 5G network connection versus the people in Charwood who have that 5G connection. So the digital divide doesn't always mean economic divide. So do the two match up? A location doesn't cause an instant categorization of digital divide. It can inform us, it can guide us, but doesn't condemn one location over another, and you need to remember that. There are 4 images on the screen here. The left-hand images look quite like a metropolitan city. It could be anywhere in the world. The right-hand images you've probably seen before. They're of the shanty towns in South Africa and the favelas in Rio de Janeiro. Top left is Rio de Janeiro. So do the two match up? A location doesn't cause an instant categorization of digital divide. It can inform us, it can guide us, but doesn't condemn one location or another, as we've just seen with the 2 examples I gave. Here are 4 images. I slightly mixed them up for you, but you'll recognise on the right hand side, you've probably seen that image of the favela in Rio de Janeiro or the shantytowns in South Africa. But on the left hand side, you might not have seen that the top left hand city is Johannesburg in South Africa. It's the business sector of Johannesburg with an average internet connection speed of 1 gigabyte per second, matching London. And the bottom left-hand image is the metro area, the business sector of Rio de Janeiro, with again a high internet speed. Now, those two locations are similar in metropolitan areas. They're both urban areas, and the right hand locations, they're not urban, they're not rural. So what are they? Well, they are going to be classed in this instance as urban because they are within that city limit. They are densely populated. They have a large number of people who are trying to connect to a network or to a connection, if they have a connection or if they even have electricity. But to tell you that from Rio de Janeiro metro centre to the favela is 3.5 miles as the bird flies, and from the shantytowns to Joburg is not too much further away, you might be quite shocked to see that these are running in parallel. And you'll have seen this many, many times in movies and on the news where these two absolute different locations are so close together. Okay? And so the digital divide is, as I said at the beginning, huge. Somebody living in a metropolitan area who's got access to the internet, has got access to technology, to read, to better their education, is going to have a far better chance at life, at success, than somebody who does not. Let's bring it back now. So you might have remembered from 2015 that Akon, the singer, had pledged to remake Africa. Okay, and all the links to these articles I'll put into a document for you and will be shared on Google Classroom with you. But they can be Googled by just taking the headline and Googling it. But Akon said that he was going to do this by installing Wi-Fi points in the poorest of areas, electricity in the poorest areas, and making sure that every home had lights. Okay, quite things that we believe are just standard within our daily lives within Britain. However, it led to problems. People were jealous. Gangs that were rife in the area and not managed by local authority started monopolising the Wi-Fi access points, started monopolising those areas where Akon had made this changed. He did a hell of a lot for the people in Africa, and he continues to do so. But without the correct installation, without the correct change, a digital divide doesn't just get cured. And that kind of comes to my next 3 articles here. You can't just give everybody the best internet access and the best device, because if they can't manage it, it becomes a bigger hindrance than not having it in the first place, some would argue. Back in 2019, during the election, Jeremy Corbyn pledged that every house in the country would have full fibre broadband, and it would be nationalised, so it would be affordable by all. He was laughed at, he was thrown out, the idea was completely condemned. The Conservative Party said this isn't doable. However, just 6 months later, Boris Johnson, as Prime Minister now, said that broadband ISPs, internet service providers, need to respond to build, and building these fast fibre connections to all homes in the UK to bridge that digital divide. So you'll see that the government is trying to do this, and I'm going to tell you now about a case study that is very personal to me, and is actually regarding my mother and father-in-law. They live in a nice area in Horsham, just outside Horsham, and they have an average download speed, or did have an average download speed of 2 to 3 megabytes per second. Now, their house, nice street, nice area, nice surroundings. You wouldn't expect it to have such a poor internet connection. The government wrote to them and said, you're going to get full fibre broadband, which was to great excitement to them. They weren't able to stream YouTube and Netflix prior to this information. However, there were going to be a slight change to their monthly bill. Okay, it was about £5 more per month without them asking for that, which for them was negligible. That was okay. But what they didn't say was the speed of this fibre broadband. Their new fibre broadband, once connected, would give them 14 megabytes per second. Now, still 7 times quicker than it was, and they can do more with it. However, when things come out like this about full fibre and fibre connection to all homes, one would assume that it is going to match the promise from websites and from TV adverts, from Virgin Media saying 100 meg fibre broadband to your door. But it doesn't. And so the digital divide still exists. Going to bring you right up to date now from an article that came out 1 day ago where Gavin Williamson, the Education Secretary, promised for 300,000 extra laptops to children in schools who were unable to access remote learning due to the digital divide. There's no plan on how this is going to be rolled out, but it does highlight that is needed. There are more than 300,000 children in this country right now who can't access their work remotely. They can't access the information because they do not have a suitable device or a suitable internet connection. If you think about that, the statistic that came out yesterday, and you can find this on the Times Educational Supplement, said there are 1.2 million children now, aged 18 and under, who cannot access remote learning because of the digital divide. That's here, and that's in this country. So let's think about location. There are a few different locations that we need to think about. Developing and developed countries, urban and rural. Developing countries tend to have a less developed industrial base than developed countries. So they don't have the fibre broadband rolled out. They don't have copper telephone lines across the entire country, which causes a problem. They also don't have the data centres. They don't have the exchanges that are able to cope with the rollout of internet connection, let alone some places having even electricity to run a computer. Developing countries have a lower human development index, and a human development index is a measure of life expectancy, education, and income per head of population. Without education, people don't know how to use a computer. You can't just put a device into somebody that has never used an electronic device and tell them to use it. They need educating. So it's far bigger than just give them a device and give them an internet connection. Urban versus rural. Well, an urban location has cities or other built-up areas. Horsham, Crawley are urban areas, the built-up areas. Rural locations are the countryside. You don't have to go too far for that. Ifield Green, Charwood for locations where we are rural areas. Okay? So how does availability and success... So how does availability and access issues differ across the global divide? Well, there's access to technology, for a start, access to the internet, access to resources, and changes to normal practices. By that, what I mean is that what you normally do and what you could do are two very different things. And using technology may allow you to change your normal working practice, but in order to do so, you need educating. And there I put the digital divide is the difference in access to digital resources in different areas of the world. And the world starts here in our area. Okay, so I would like you to watch this TED Talk on bridging the digital divide. And I would like you to answer these questions. What does Jim compare the digital divide to? And how does the digital divide impact daily life according to Jim? Now, Jim talks from a perspective of America, but it is very relatable to the UK. And so I want you to think about what he's saying and how it impacts everyday life in that country. Once you've done that, have a think about the power of the internet. And I'm going to just mention Marcus Rashford. He has used his status to fight government cuts to school meals. He did a lot of this via Twitter and via Instagram. He's now been recognised with an MBE from the Queen, but he's recently appeared on American TV, and I'll give you the link to this as well, with the campaign. He is seen now all over the world as somebody who is trying to fight child poverty. And now, in this week, he has announced he's going to be fighting the digital divide too. Because there are people in our school community, in our country, in our areas, where they cannot access what somebody else can simply because of a digital restriction. And that's not fair. Moving on from that, I would like you to watch this second TED Talk on how we begin to bridge the digital divide sustainably. Like I said at the beginning, it isn't a case of give them an internet connection and give them a device and we've solved the problem. It's far bigger than that. We've got to think about education. We've got to think about their income, their sustainability. How are they going to use that device, manage that device, and keep up to date with that device? There is more people in this world who do not have an internet connection than those who do. And once we begin to think about that as a statement, we begin to think there's a long way to go. We also need to recognise that things are ever changing. Earlier this year, so a couple of weeks ago, Flash Player was turned off. That has been monumental for so many people who use Flash. When Windows 7 support was switched off, many people in developing countries who were using Windows 7 were stuck and had to either use an unsupported platform or pay a lot of money for a new platform. What is the impact of that? When you watch Mike's TED Talk, I would like you to have a look at who does the digital divide disadvantage. What analogy does Mike give regarding the football match, and how does he use this analogy? What is he trying to explain? And what you should come out with this is that the digital divide doesn't just impact those who directly can't access things due to a lack of technology, but it impacts every single one of us. What are we missing by not being able to connect with those who can't connect with us? And finally, I would like you to take a thought and discuss the following. What are the impacts of the digital divide on information access in the UK right now? Look at more than one age bracket, discuss more than one element, and pull in your knowledge and background and understanding. As always, if you've got any questions, please don't hesitate to ask. Thank you for listening.